Hello and welcome to this episode of Wise Human. Today I have with me Chase Bjornson. He is a visual artist, producer, entrepreneur, and phenomenal photographer. Seriously, if you haven't seen his work, go check out his photography. It is incredible.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Chase. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So we met randomly. A lot of people ask me how I get guests for my podcast, and typically it's just meeting people out and about randomly. And that's how we met out in Aspen. And you just had an interesting story. So I thought, hey, come on and let's share. So what really piqued my interest about your story is that you are a producer on Naked and Afraid. However, your journey to get there is also very interesting. So if you want to share a little bit about what you were doing prior to COVID and losing your job, can we start there?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Before COVID, I was heavily involved in the music industry. So I had been building my career from playing in bands in high school, and I started a promotion company in college and started booking shows and festivals. And then after college, I got a job at a much larger company which owned all these music venues throughout Montana, and it was really going really well. Sky was the limit. It seemed like I was getting promotions, and it was just all just going so well pre-pandemic. And then they sent me to Bozeman, Montana, to open up a new music venue. And within 1 month of being there, COVID hit. And with live music, gatherings of large people, that was the first thing to go, last thing to come back. And at the time, it was like, well, what's COVID? Is it going to be 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, forever? Will it ever go back to being the same? So it kind of put me in this crisis mode of I was kind of an identity crisis and like paranoia about like what's going to happen. Is everything that I've done to this point a waste of time now in this new world, this new COVID era world? So I really had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do next.
You
And
said,
it basically like I was like 6 or so months, I was just building stuff under the table, doing landscaping work under the table, and I hated it. And I was super depressed, and I was at a very low point in my life. That being said, from my experience anyway, sometimes in the lowest points is when you find the most inspiration to change your life for the better. And so I started taking my photography more seriously. I started pursuing my creative interests that I had really put on the back burner when I got heavily involved in music. And I just started trying to reinvent myself. And over the course of a long time of just trying to figure out what that means, opportunities started opening up, and I kind of started to manifest this new life. And fast forward to now, it's brought me all over the world, and it's been super successful, and I'm actually really happy with my life now. So I'm actually really grateful that everything happened during COVID and that I hit that extraordinary low and that everything crumbled apart, because now I'm actually really stoked about where my life is. And I was stoked about my life then too, but now to compare the two, it's like, wow, I'm actually way happier now in this post-COVID era, post-COVID.
right. Yeah. Before we dive too much into current day, can you talk more about the identity crisis and when everything kind of got pulled out from underneath you, what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started playing, well, I suppose we can go, we're just gonna deep dive. You can use whatever you want.
Let's go for it.
So I'm the youngest of three brothers. I growing up, what I mean by that is I was this young kid. I didn't really have an identity as a little boy. I was like the younger brother, right? So everything that I did and everything about who I was a lot was that was attributed to my older brothers. So like for instance, on this day that I'm about to mention, which changed my life forever and gave me that identity that I'm about to tell you about, I showed up and I was wearing like basketball shorts and a basketball t-shirt. And I don't care about basketball at all. I don't care about really any sports. I played soccer, but that was about it. So I was just like this aimless kid until I was 12. And when I was 12, my eldest brother brought me to the Vans Warped Tour, which was, rest in peace, a traveling punk rock festival that went all around the country when punk and pop punk were really in the spotlight of our culture, or at least a big part of the spotlight. And I went to that because my brother worked on it, and he just had this crazy idea. He's like, I'm going to bring my little brothers, me and my other brother, to the Warped Tour, Mom. And she was okay with it. So he brought us there. He gave us all access passes. And I show up in like basketball shorts, didn't have any identity. And there's this crazy punk rock festival. And I was 12. And I got to go backstage and see that whole chaotic world of live music production. And especially one like that, where it packs up and goes to the next destination the next day. It's like a touring festival. It completely rocked my world. It's hard to put words to express how much that changed my life and how important that day was for me. Like I was like on stage for acts like Taking Back Sunday at Atmosphere and just having my mind blown. I'm 12. So from that day forward, I was committed. I was a committed disciple of punk rock. Then came the black clothes and the skateboarding and learning to play the guitar, and music became my focus. That I now figured out who I was. Fast forward into high school. Now I'm playing in bands, like pop punk bands, and I would design brands around those bands with like graphic design and some very amateur photography to then book those bands on shows. And that was my life in high school. Then fast forward to college. I was not a great student in high school, not because I'm not smart, but just because I really didn't care. I did excellent in all my art classes and history classes. Everything else is like, don't care. So because of that, my parents forced me into college. Like there was no break for me. My brother took a break, went and traveled. That wasn't going to happen to me because they didn't think that I would go back to college and actually do it. So I basically went to college without knowing what I wanted to do. The bands had kind of disintegrated because we graduated and moved on and all that. I stayed in Montana, which is where I'm from, for college. And I was super aimless, got really involved in partying. And then I got out of the dorms and started throwing parties. And that got me in lots of trouble. I got arrested and it was not going great. Withdrawal failing from classes, parents super worried about me. But then I ended up in this class called the Entertainment Management class. It's one of many. It's an entire program at the University of Montana, which was founded by what's called the Montana Mafia. It's basically a group of individuals that went to the University of Montana in the 70s and moved on and became bigwigs in entertainment, from William Morris Endeavor, William Morris Endeavor, Live Nation, the huge companies, and they came back together and started this program at the University of Montana. Super random, I know. No one thinks of like University of Montana entertainment management, but it's a very unique program, and it's really cool, and it's full of opportunities. And I just found my way in that class, and I just thought, wow, this is crazy. This is something I'm actually into. And before that, I'd sat way up in the back of my classes if I even went to class. And from that day forward, I'll never forget it. There was a guest instructor. His name was Dan Torty, who later became a mentor, still is a mentor, and later became a boss of mine in a much later chapter. And he did a presentation about throwing shows, booking shows independently, like bringing artists to Montana. And I was like, whoa, I can throw parties legally and bring music to Montana that I care about, which at the time was lots of hip hop. And I was really into Seattle hip hop, like more emotional, intelligent hip hop. So I just had this idea in this class, like, I'm going to start a company and I'm going to start booking hip hop shows here at the University of Montana, then in Missoula. And so I did. It was called Royale Entertainment Company. I started when I was 19, and it soon after it was paired with an apparel line. So we made hats and shirts and stuff, and it just started taking off. It became really successful. And then I was a front row student, and then I actually was going to class, and then I had something to attribute, firsthand knowledge to in the classes. So then at the time I was going to school, I started in fine arts. Don't know why I did that. Switched to media arts for film production and graphic design and photography oriented things. And then I switched to business school once I got in that class. And I had something to relate every class to because I was also running a business. So that was going really well. And also at the same time, I was starting to go to Burning Man and get really into electronic music. So then I completely shifted my focus to electronic shows. Started booking lots of electronic acts through the rest of the later years in college. Made a festival called Socotra, brought Zed's Dead and Keys and Crates, and it was going really well. And then I graduated college, sold all my things, went on a backpacking trip to Asia, came back and I was given a job offer to work at a much larger company, Logjam Presents, which owns the music venues in Montana, all the nicest music venues, builds music venues, does all these crazy big moves, books huge acts like Robert Plant, Sheryl Crow, Mumford and Sons, that kind of stuff, as well as acts like Zez Dead and Diplo. So I got that job, and that was going really well. And I was designing sustainability efforts for the music venues, making all of our venues like certified green and eliminating unnecessary waste, which is something I'm really passionate about, and something a really random opportunity that they gave me to do. And then also booking these shows and managing shows basically from the ground up, dealing with the artists before they get there, doing all the logistics for the day of show, running the show, taking in all the money, paying the artists, seeing them off. And so my identity was really wrapped up in that whole space. And in that span I just talked about, that was, it went from when I was 16 in bands till I was, what was it, 29 or something like, long time, but when COVID hit. So my identity was so wrapped up in music. It's like who I was. That's what I did. That's just who I was. I was the music man. So when something happens like a pandemic, and I had all this, I don't want to say notoriety, but I guess I had a status that I built for. Like I built towards this level of career success and identity in the music industry. And then COVID hit, and it was so fast. It was like 1 month. It was like, okay, first cancellation. Second cancellation, third cancellation, fourth cancellation. All of our summer shows are just like one by one, boom, boom, boom. All these are being canceled. And I'll never forget the show. I believe it was the Motet. I did a lot of those kind of shows, and they kind of blur together because it's not really, I'm not that into like jam bands, but I'm pretty sure it's the Motet. And the energy was so crazy backstage. Like the tour was freaked out. No one would get within 6 feet of each other. It was like the very beginning of COVID. Everyone's like high stress. They're like, you hear them talking and they're like, yeah, our whole tour is being canceled. This is it. This is our last show. And it's just like, whoa, the energy is crazy. And at that point I knew, I was like, I am going to be out of a job soon for sure. And sure enough, like 2 weeks later, it was like every show is canceled now, no income for the company. Therefore, everyone is laid off and indefinitely. And so to have that happen, and I was 1 month in a new place, and I was so excited to get the ball rolling in Bozeman. And it went from like having it all to having nothing within such a short time frame. And it really got to me, and it really made me feel like, whoa, what do I do now? Like, what am I possibly going to do now? And again, at the time, it was like, wow, I don't know how long COVID is going to be. I don't know like what's next or what this really means. But it was the first time in my life where I had felt like the tablecloth was pulled from underneath me. It went from like 100 to 0 in a really, really quick time span. And then I started doing landscape. Like I hate landscaping. I'm like doing it illegally under the table, taking in like the unemployment and all that stuff. And I'm just like wondering, like, what am I going to do now? So it was definitely a low. It went from like so high to so low in such a short time frame, which just forced me to reinvent myself.
And how did you go about doing that?
So at the time, I'd always been really into photography, but more so as an amateur. I love traveling. I've traveled a lot through my life, and I always take photos. So I had a decent camera rig, nothing crazy, like a pretty old fashioned DSLR rig. And I would take lots of photos, and I was really into that. So one of my first thoughts was like, I got one of those checks, government stimulus checks. I had this van, so I wasn't paying rent or anything. I was like, I'm going to upgrade my camera kit. Boom. So I upgraded my camera kit, got an actual professional camera, and decided I was going to learn that camera as best as I could and go out and take as many pictures as I could and make that more of an actual pursue that as a career path. And then I also decided to film. So I had mentioned earlier, I went to school, starting to go to school for media arts. So like I still minored in that when I graduated college, but I wasn't using it because I was so in music. So I never thought I didn't have to. But that was an obvious segue, was photo, film, back into that world, back into the creative space. So I just was like, well, how can I figure that out? I need to get jobs doing that somehow. And granted, I was like, no, this is so hard for me to think about. I was late 20s, but not that young, right? So like when you're getting hired on like film jobs or something, you're hiring like on my first couple jobs, like my coworkers were like either just about to graduate college or just did graduate college in the film school. Like, you know, that was my competition was like these younger kids who had more experience than I did. So I was given like night production assistant jobs where I basically camped in my van and like did something if there was something to do. But like it was a weird space to transition into into that as like an older person with little to no experience in that. Lots of experience in music, but it's like who cares? This is a whole different world. So it happened when it was actually Naked and Afraid. Naked and Afraid is shooting in Montana in July 2020, late July, August. And they hired a dear friend of mine from Bozeman who knew I was looking for work and like scrounging. And so she reached out and her direct quote was, by the way, her name's Erica Scher. She's lovely. Her direct quote was, "Hey, I just got hired on Naked and Afraid in Montana. Do you want a job as a production assistant? It could be cool. It could be weird. I have no idea." And I was like, yeah, 100%. Like, I'll be there. No problem. And so I jumped on that again as a night production assistant. I was literally just camping out like near where the cast are with the medic. And that was it. I was just like, if something happened, I would grab a camera and film it. But most of the time, nothing happened. So I was just like chilling, just waiting with the walkie in case something did happen. But I got to see like how the world works in that like production set. It's a month-long shoot because they're in there for 3 weeks. And I was pretty fascinated by it. And I was like, I could definitely do something else in this job. So I approached the production manager, Lauren Fulweiler, also amazing. And I just said, Lauren, I have so much experience in management and, things that are not directly related, but ours can be related. And I definitely can do more. And I would love to do more. So she started giving me more responsibilities. I started doing the day work instead of the night PA work, which was sweet. And they started putting more responsibilities in my lap to help with the management because there's a lot of logistics. It's like in music, my scope was so much more short-sighted from the venue side because like I would advance to the tour a month out. They would get there. I would do the whole show and then see them off. For the tour side, it's a much more long-term thing. They have like 10 of these shows, or obviously a lot more in most cases, but in this example, say 10 of them. So like their time frame's a lot longer. They have crew traveling, they have hotels and all these things. That's what a production manager in film is more like a tour manager. So I quickly adapted to it and I was into it. And I told them I wanted more. So that was going well. Then I went to Colorado and did another one with them as a production assistant under the assumption that they all knew I wanted to do more. So I was really hungry and really ambitious and like really trying to prove myself. That went really well. And then they gave me another one, but promoted me to a production coordinator in Arizona. And this whole time I'm traveling around in the van, which is perfect because I just finished the van enough to travel. So like traveling between gigs, living in the van all around the country. So at this point, things are kind of like picking up and I'm feeling good about, where I'm at. And then the production coordinator job went really well. So they made me a production manager, sent me off to Africa for 2 months in like the height of COVID. And then I'm a PM. So now I had my own crews, a lot more responsibilities, and it's all freelance too. So then now other jobs were opening up for other shows on other networks in other countries, which is sweet. And I went to Africa multiple times. I went to South America, Costa Rica. And then during all of those times, anytime I was sent anywhere, I would deliberately keep my plane ticket extended out for weeks. And then for those weeks, I would just cold email people and try to figure out photography jobs. So basically like say Naked and Afraid sending me to Africa for 2 months, then I'll stay for an extra month, line up my own trip itinerary of photo jobs, and then like get a vehicle and go do those. So the two like really worked really well hand in hand. And both of them have just started taking off. And then later on as a production manager, I can do that job for sure. And I did do that job, but I'm way more into the creative space. So I just started putting my name in the hat to become a producer. Like I was like, I don't want to be a producer. I know that I can. I know that I'm not traditionally, I went a different route. I went the management route and not the creative route, but I know for sure I can do that job and I really want it. And that conversation kept happening over the course of like a year and a half. And everyone was like, yeah, cool, dude. Like, here's another production manager job. But eventually it happened. And I got my first producer job last summer. And then so now I'm a producer and I love it. And it's all freelance. So I'm a contract worker, which I love because the way my brain works, I can get so bogged down if it's like a 9 to 5 environment. Like even in music for Logjam Presents, if it was too much the same, too monotonous, or too much routine, it would start to drive me crazy. Like I live in a van, for instance. Like I need to like be switching things up all the time. So this is perfect because it's contract work. So right now, for instance, I'm just doing photography jobs and building another van. And soon I'll probably hit the road again with Naked and Afraid or with another show. But yeah, it's just been such a random, complete flip. And now it's starting to work out. And I'm actually realizing I'm a lot happier. It's funny how that works out.
It's interesting how that works, right? Sometimes we don't know what we're missing until we get somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely. And like I just need to like, a lot of photography is being having the right gear, having the right eye, and being in the right place at the right time. And a lot of times for what I do, which is like adventure, wildlife, nature photography, the right place at the right time is super remote. And you have to be there for a long time to get that shot. Like for instance, one of my favorite shots I have is of a blood-faced lion who had just eaten a zebra. To get that moment with that lion, it took weeks of driving around in the Kalahari Desert in Africa with nothing, like no results at all. And then finally got it. So like being able to take the time away from contracted gigs to pursue those opportunities in photography it's amazing. It's necessary, honestly. It'd be hard to be a photographer and have like a 9 to 5. Well, I mean, depending on what you're shooting, but to do what I'm doing and have like a 9 to 5, like when I was in the music industry, I started with 2 weeks vacation a year. That was like my contract. And I'm talking about my last job. Then I negotiated up to 3 weeks and I was planning on negotiating up to 4 weeks, which they weren't going to love at all. But how it would work is like, I would spend all of that in January because I just need to try, I need to get out. So I'd also have no vacation for like the entire year, which is it's so against my morals as a human being to be locked into an equation like that. Like I can't, like it drives me nuts. And to look back on that, no way. So it's all worked out because now, like you said, you don't know what you have or you don't know what you're missing until you have it. I didn't know that I could actually just take 2 months off from working and like go and pursue my photography and go travel indefinitely in my van that I built. So yeah, I love it. I'm super happy. It's so interesting. Like that's like a long-term manifestation. Like when I was in the music industry, I was like, man, I just want to travel. I need to like figure out something where I can travel and work, but it just felt so unattainable at the time. And now it's happening. So it's sweet.
Yeah, you made it happen. I can relate to the having space, the creative space. I feel like I don't think any human is supposed to do a 9 to 5 personally. I was laid off during COVID, and in that time I had a bunch of time and space, right? And that's when this podcast came through because I had the time to rest and to just be and to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. You know, I was applying for jobs, of course, but when I felt motivated to do it. And then the podcast just came through and I got into complete flow state with it. And had I not been laid off due to COVID, I don't know if it ever would have came through. So I wish that more people had an opportunity to take space and see what happens, because I think that's when the magic happens, and that's when we find our true purpose and potential and share that. And then the more that people share that, the better the world is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever go back to a 9 to 5. Actually, I know for sure I won't. That's not like have to because it's some business that I'm operating and I'm choosing to do that for a time. But yeah, I'm not going to go back to that lifestyle at all. I'm glad that I was able to have that eye-opening experience. And yeah, I think you're right. I think the world would be better if everyone could have that eye-opening experience.
Mm-hmm. So you've kind of floated around a little bit and weren't sure what you wanted to do. Like in college, you took the random entertainment management class, and that sparked your interest. And then, you were laid off and then found the passion back in photography and producing. What do you recommend for somebody that doesn't really know what their purpose is or what fills them up, and they're just kind of going through the grind and just not, they're alive, but they're surviving. They're not really living.
Hmm. I would say, I mean, it's easier to say than do, especially when you're in a moment, especially if you're like unhappy or feeling uninspired. But if you can take a step back and look at the overall drawing board, like what makes you tick? There's something that makes everyone tick. There's something. It's sometimes it's not that easy to identify, but like say even if someone's just like, maybe someone works 3 jobs, is super busy all the time, but like also finds that like they doodle a lot or something, like, and maybe they'd be interested in pursuing that and like making art. I think everyone has something. There's something that makes everyone tick. At least everyone that I know like there is something there, but it kind of it's sometimes it's hard to take that step back and look at things from a broad scope. And like I'm a huge believer in writing things down and like making lists and making these ridiculous, super messy webs of thoughts that I have, starting with one thing in the middle. So like that's kind of, I did that when I lost my job. I was like, well, who am I? What makes me tick besides the music? So it's like me, and then just everything that like makes you like happy. Unless you're like a robot, there's something that makes you feel something. And I think trying to take a step back and look at it from a really big picture, and then honing in on things that actually make you excited, things that make your heart beat, things that make you feel love and enjoyment. I think it's pretty safe to say everyone at least has one of those, even if they don't know how to articulate it. There is something that makes you stoked about something. Maybe it's a podcast you like to listen to, and maybe you find that you want to make a podcast. Like it's like I don't know. Like I think zooming way out and just looking at your life, like who am I? What is my identity? What makes me tick? And then once you identify those things that make you tick, you branched out even more webs. How could I actually make this a sustainable thing? And all things are financially sustainable, but maybe there's a way that you can make a lifestyle that something else is financially stable enough to where you can focus on those outlets, those creative outlets that make you happy. But yeah, sometimes it's not that easy to identify, but I think that it is important for people to have passion projects, whether or not those are passion projects that you can live off of or not. I still think it's really important to do them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned that you were depressed. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That's something I've experienced as well. And I think it's important to talk about because I think there's still stigma around it, and there shouldn't be.
I agree. I actually get depressed. Like it tends to happen at least once a year. Sometimes like twice. Even in like the highest parts of my life, sometimes I get depressed. It's just like I'm a pretty emotional person. I'm a Pisces, very watery. Um, I think it's normal and it sucks. It really sucks. I've never, but I think it's just a normal part of the journey, and I'll never seek to like medicate it. Like, I personally don't believe in antidepressants or anything like that. Western, in my mind, Western ideas of slapping a band-aid on your issues and just moving away from it and not like honing in on it and changing things about your life that are making you feel that way. Even though it's hard, I think you really have to you have to change something about your life when you hit those moments. So I try and use them to be a positive in the end. At the time, they are hard, and waking up is hard, and every day just feels like long. And like whenever I'm depressed, my heart just kind of feels heavy, and like I just feel like heartsick, and nothing really gets me that stoked. But when I look back at those times now, I see that they're actually very beneficial for the long-term growth of myself, of my life development. And that's because I chose to utilize them as such. So, for instance, it can be anything. You can be depressed about your job, depressed about a relationship, or just really not have anything specific that you're depressed about, but you just are depressed. And I try and I actively journal. I find journaling to be extremely therapeutic and helpful. I journal a lot when I'm sad. Like if you open my journal, it's pretty sad. But I try and also flip that in more recent times. I tried to flip that, and when I'm really happy, I also journal because I go back and I'll read it. So I'm like, where is that? Where is my mind at? And like sometimes I'm like, woof, whoa, you were really dark place at that point. But then now that I journal also when I'm in my highs, it's like what had me ticking then? You know, like I find it really helpful to go back and read where my mind was in that moment, raw. No one like, I just find when I journal, there's no filter on it. I'm just journaling to myself, my future self. And I try and just learn from every time that I am depressed and just realize that being depressed is perfectly normal and it's just part of the human experience. I think it's about what can you do in that depression to grow and change yourself and your life and your surroundings, those who you surround yourself with, your job, whatever, to become a better person and be happy again. And it's a lot easier to say than it is to do, um, especially if you're masking it with alcohol or drugs or antidepressants or whatever. But it's the fact that it is normal, and you're right, it is stigmatized. People don't like to talk about it, but it's totally normal. I've been depressed more times than I can even recall to tell you right now. It's just part of it's a part of the life that all of us live. And I think that every time you're depressed, if you can again take a step back, write about it, learn from it, and grow from it, that's kind of what life's all about.
Continuously growing and evolving, definitely.
Always a work in progress.
Hmm. And yeah, I think once there's nothing else to work on, like we can leave our physical bodies because that's why we're here.
Yeah, totally. Also, one
Uh,
thing I will say to anyone who is depressed is like getting outside helps me so much. And I had neglected that so much. Like in times where I'm like, fuck, I haven't done anything active for a month. No wonder, like you need to get your body moving. Like I have to get outside and like do something, mountain bike, ski, walk, whatever. But like getting
mhm.
outside has such a huge impact that I didn't used to realize until recent years in my life. But like getting out and moving your body is such a big part of having a healthy mind.
Mhm. Yeah, moving your body is important and getting outside for me is super important. But I realize for some people it's not as big of a thing. Like I go outside and sit in the sunshine for 10 minutes and I am a different human.
Totally.
Like I went hiking yesterday. I was just like, life is amazing.
Totally. Yeah. That was something I neglected for a chapter of my life. And yeah, I'm the same way. I have to get outside every day and at least do something. Like you said,
Mhm.
outside for 10 minutes, whatever. But it's important.
So
People do neglect that.
so sometimes I feel like you know what you need to do to get yourself kind of moving, but what if you don't have the motivation? Because that comes with depression too,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like you're unmotivated. You might know what you need to do, but you just can't make yourself do it. What in your experience, how do you get over that hurdle? And do you sometimes just let yourself just be and sit in it?
Definitely. Yeah. There's times where I'm just like, I just need to actually just do nothing today. And that's fine. But tomorrow I'm going to do something. And what I do is I always make again, writing things down. I always have these lists, like huge task lists in my like notes on my phone. There's always like, there's a bunch of things I could be doing and I should be doing, but and I look at that and it's overwhelming and it's a lot. And it's like, oof. And especially if you're not in a good headspace, it's like super daunting. And it just feels like I'm just not going to do anything. But what I've learned over the last few years is like, wow, someone said it so eloquently the other day, and I'm gonna butcher this, but it was really good and it resonated. I couldn't find it again, unfortunately, but it's here in fragments at least. um, if you're, it's basically it's like someone's lost in the woods, and someone who's with them says, "Well, Can you see out of the woods?" No, I just see a bunch of trees. Well, can you see the step right in front of you? Yeah. Okay, we'll take the next step, and then eventually you'll get to where you need to go. So in a list of 100 things you have to do, and you look at it and you're like, nope, ugh, gross. Just pick one thing. And that's helpful, like right now. Like for instance, right now my to-do list is huge and I'm feeling super unmotivated and I haven't been working in a while. So I'm like kind of in that space where it's like, well, I'll just go ski or like do nothing today. But once I focus on just just hyper focus on one task that I can do, not only does it make me feel good when I finish that task, but then B, like I'm one step closer. Like an example, I'm literally looking at the van right in front of me, so I can say that because I've had this van sitting here for the last 2 months and I haven't done anything to it because like I was just life happens, And then also it's very daunting. There's so many things to do. But yesterday I just decided, okay, you know what? Zoom out, focus in one thing. I'm gonna put the roof vent in. And so yesterday I chopped a hole in my brand new Mercedes and like the roof vent's almost in there and I feel so good. But it's such a minute little task. There are like 1,000 other things that I need to do for that van to be done. But it feels so good to reward yourself by just accomplishing one thing. Even if you just do one thing, you're gonna feel good. So sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself, especially if you're depressed and your to-do list is huge. But if you just give yourself the time, because I take days like that where I literally do nothing and I just chill and I nap and I just like whatever, watch a show or something. Like I love to do that. But when I do that, think about in the back of my mind, like what's my next day gonna be? And even if it's simple, maybe I'll do one thing the next day. I'll cross one thing off my to-do list, but that's gonna feel good. And now I know that's gonna feel good. But there have certainly been times in my life where it's like just daunting and frustrating and just makes you feel even more overworked and more depressed to even like just knowing that you have to do things, not having the motivation to do them. So I've certainly been there, but I guess my advice to those people would just be like focus on one thing, one step at a time. Don't think as big picture in that moment. Just think about the little things you can do. And I promise you're gonna feel good once you do those. It's like, yes, fuck yeah, I did that. One step closer. And my list is still huge, but one step closer.
It's slightly shorter now. Yeah. And I find that when you do that one thing, it tends to snowball into other things
Definitely.
because you feel good about that. And then, like, say you went for a walk, you're like, okay, I'm going to eat something healthy tonight, or I'm going to like take a bath, and you start to see the chain effect of just that one thing.
Absolutely. It's like momentum. It's like when you start anything active, it's like that first part it's gonna be rough. But once you get in that mode, then you're gonna do other things too. And it's gonna feel really good. And then
Mhm.
yeah, it's just like it's all building blocks. Well, once you just do the first thing, you're gonna feel good and you're probably gonna do other stuff too.
Mhm. For me, I know that at a period of time, like if I had a day or two that I was down, I'd be like, oh no, like I'm depressed again. And I think in years of just living life and researching and growing, I've realized, everybody experiences times of up and down. And that just because you have a day or two that you're down doesn't mean that you're headed for depression. It's like, okay, maybe I actually just need to rest for a day or two and then go for a hike and like my whole world is shifted.
Mhm.
So for me, that was a big realization of not letting my mind create my reality, because I think you can do that often.
Definitely.
I mean,
That's
it's
like another thing.
manifestation, right?
Exactly. And that's another thing I've kind of thought about recently, is the labeling of things, right? And like they becoming those things. So like you're having a tough time, you're in a life transition, whatever. You're not happy with your relationship, you're not happy with your job or something. You go see a doctor, they're like, oh yeah, you're depressed. Here's some antidepressants. And
Mhm.
you're like, oh shit, I'm a depressed person. So now I'm gonna act like a depressed person because now that's who I am. I'm just told that. So now I am that. And now I'm needing it's just like you have I feel like I'm not even trying to put this into words, it's just something I've been kind of thinking about lately. That you kind of manifest your own destiny by what you're calling yourself. So like you just said, like, yeah, down days are gonna happen. I have them all the time. And that doesn't mean I'm like depressed or like that I'm like fucked up or something. That's not how I'm calling it to myself. But I think that happens a lot in our society. I think people like are told something and then that's like boom, that's who you are. You're a depressed person now. Like you gotta take meds, you gotta fix your shit because now you're
Something's wrong, you're broken.
exactly something's wrong with you and you're messed up and this is gonna be a long road to recovery. But it's like I don't think it's so binary like that. I think you kind of just you pigeonhole yourself into this identity of being depressed. And that being said, I've definitely been depressed and told myself like I've known that I'm depressed. And that's just how it is. But that's not how it is all the time. I think like I have daily struggles all the time. I'm not depressed right now, but I still have days where I'm feeling like super low and overwhelmed. And I think it's just part of the ebbs and flows of life, the peaks and valleys.
The human experience.
Human experience.
Yeah. And words are powerful things, right? Like I try to be conscious of what I say and how I say it. And just when you were speaking, that kind of brought that back up. You know, saying I'm depressed is one thing, but saying I feel depressed or I'm
Yeah,
experiencing depression is a different thing, because you're not identifying yourself as it. It's just something passing through.
definitely. As it will for everyone.
Yeah.
Period.
I mean, everything in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Manual for Psychology, every single condition in there is something that everybody experiences. Just to be diagnosed, it's a prolonged time period, right? So we all experience like episodes of mania, you know, because we're super excited and we're like lit up and we just like won the lottery or, you know, married our love of our life or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're quick to over identify and label. And I don't think that that serves.
Yeah, totally.
I appreciate you sharing about that. So jumping to Naked and Afraid, we'll just jump over there now. I'm so curious. What do you experience observing these people?
Oh
Like,
God.
what are they going through? Is they're like
uh,
dropped in the middle of nowhere, right? Are they with a partner?
yeah, typically.
Okay.
I'll have to really watch what I say just to make sure I'm not saying anything I can't say.
Okay.
But
I can
the
always
typical,
cut things too.
okay, where I might like post like, oh wait, delete that. Um, so the typical formula of Naked and Afraid is one male, one female. They have never met. They go in there, they disrobe, they meet each other naked, already naked, and then try and survive for 3 weeks with extremely limited resources. Typically, one thing that each of them brings, or two or three. This depends on the situation, but it might be like you and I. Maybe I have a knife and you have a fire starter, and we're also given a water box or in some gnarly jungle somewhere, and that's it. And then basically, my job is to follow them. I've never like worked in a reality TV setting or really watched reality TV, but I've always been like under the assumption that it's super contrived and fake, and they're probably drinking like, you know, Capri Suns off camera or something like that. I was pleasantly surprised about how authentic the experience is. Like they really are just going in there and starving for 3 weeks. So like my job as a producer is to go in there and I'm their go-to person. I create relationships with both of them. Sometimes there are more also. There's other spin-offs of Naked and Afraid that we could dive into, but the typical formula, 2 people, 21 days. I'm in there every day with those people. And basically my job is to just follow them, film everything, and interview them every day. And just basically this, like, I don't have to like make a story. They make the story. It just happens right in front of you. Like in the situation where you're stripped to nothing and you starve in the wilderness, uncomfortable with bugs and all this stuff, like the story is gonna happen. It plays itself out. It just happens right there. As the human, like it's a very primitive version of the human experience, like an ancient an ancient person's experience. So yeah, that's basically it. I watch people starve and try and figure it out for 3 weeks and tell that story. I'll arc that story however it happens. And sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't get along. And oftentimes they tap out. So like they're given that option. They can quit whenever they want to.
Do they have
Sometimes
to
they'll both
quit
quit, and then
together?
nope. Often one person will quit and one person will keep going. And you know what? More often than not, it's the male who quits and the female who makes it all the way.
That's right.
Statistically speaking, females are a lot tougher than males. You like even like big macho like Marine Corps, like I'm gonna kill this, blah blah blah. Like day 3, dehydrated, out, and then the mom of like 3 kids with no outdoor experience makes it 21 days. So it's funny. It's funny that I watched that dynamic because it unfolds more often than not.
What human experience do you see, or like what emotions do you see typically come up? Is there a through line of what everybody tends to experience or most, or is it completely different for everybody?
It's completely different for everyone because some people it depends why they're doing it, right? So like someone might be doing it to prove that they're a badass. and they can like the macho man mentality, like they can do it because they're tough. Someone might be doing it to prove something to themselves, like regardless of what anyone else thinks, I think I can do this. Or, you know, some people want to go out and just have some sort of experience, like mentally. When you're broken down into nothing and you have to survive and figure it out, like you have a lot of time to think. Like I'm there every day, but then at night I'm not there. There's cameras rolling and there's audio rolling, but like those people are just in their thoughts, especially if they're alone. So like if someone, I've seen many times where one cast member is out within 3 days, and then the other person is there solo for 18 days. And unless I'm around to like bounce thoughts off of every once in a while, like they're completely in their own head. And I've seen that manifest in a really cool way, because like there was one cast member who was super cool. He got on the show because his friend had applied, and his friend's wife was like so mad at him that like made him also sign on. So this guy also signed on, had never even watched the show, and then he was chosen and he did it. So he went out there, he's like, well, I didn't even watch the show until I was chosen to be on it, and then I started watching it. But like he had a really cool, it was a wholesome and random way to get into the show that I thought was hilarious. But then B, like in his time out there, he thought a lot about his kids and his life in general and his relationships, and he really spun it in a way to where when he got out of there, he was so ready to deepen his relationship with his kids, spend more time with his kids. Like he had all these goals and things that came out of starving for 3 weeks and having a miserable time, you know, in the middle of the jungle. And he spun it in a way that was really cool, and I thought was really really rad. And then they become much more like, it's just so much reflection. It's cool to see a transformation like that happen. That doesn't always happen. It depends on the person, depends on the journey that they're already on before they go into that experience, and also how that experience is, because some are more rough than others. Some people are more capable than others. You know, some people like literally have no idea what to do, and it can be really hard on them and really like mess them up. Some people will take that and express it one way, some people will take that and express it another way. So it's very random and very different for everyone that goes on that show. Also locations, it depends where you are. Some people might thrive, like if I had to do that and it was in Montana and you paid me a lot of money, I could survive here no problem. But I'm from Montana. Send me to like the desert or like the jungle in South America, I'd do horrible. And the same would go for, you know, I think someone coming from there, like they've never seen snow before, they come here and it's like, ooh, yikes. So it depends on the set and setting, the headspace, the person's journey that they're on already, and how they want to use that time, basically. But it's fascinating.
Do they actually do naked and afraid in cold areas?
They do. There's a Frozen one. I did one in Montana called Frozen.
And they have no clothes?
No, they in that situation they're given additional items, which are like ice health, but it's cold. It's like and they spend a lot more time in their shelter, so it's a lot less active. But yeah, and it's not like peak winter. It's not like January, February. It's like April. It was like, in that case, it was like late March, April. But it was in Montana. That was a different one that I did just last year.
Has anybody ever asked you to bring them food?
They never ask because they know that that's not going to happen. I've heard of like cast members being like super sneaky and like trying to steal things, and I guess one cast member got caught trying to steal something from a crew camp, which is like not near them. They actually like went out of their way, and they were actually called out on camera, removed from the show, and like it was a whole shaming process. But no one's ever like, they know the game. They know there's a lot of prep that goes into it for them. Like they don't just come and they just dropped in and it's like, all right, like bye. They come in, they're staying in a hotel somewhere on like nearby for the days in advance. The production manager is prepping them what to expect and all that kind of stuff. And also I'm prepping them for what to expect. So like they know the dance. They know they can quit. If they want to quit, I can, like, I'll get you whatever you want right now. You want peanut butter? You just have to quit right now. but most of them know. Like they're mostly they know what they're in for. They're not like being forced into this or anything.
Mhm. And it's such a reward when you get through something that's really challenging, especially something that you want to quit, to keep yourself in the game and stay with it and make it through is such a reward.
Totally.
And
And I
to
never
build
want them I never want them to quit. So like I'm trying to be their biggest fan. It's like, dude, you got this. It's 2 more weeks, whatever, 11 more days. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I love when they make it.
awesome. Well, let's see. Anything else you want to share before I ask you final questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, what is the biggest lesson or one of the most valuable lessons that you have learned in all of your travels?
One of the most valuable lessons. I think I like to do. So I guess first of all, I'll share a funny tidbit. Like whenever I travel, my mission is to undermine American stereotypes because whether or not anyone wants to believe it, who hasn't traveled a lot, like Americans have a lot of baggage that we travel with. People are we're known as being loud and rude and elitist and have this sense of like victory over the entire world and dominance. And I have always made it a point to, since I first went overseas when I was 18 to Germany, to undermine that and show the world that like not all Americans are like ignorant bigots who want to just like, dominate and enforce their opinion on everyone. So I always try, and I think I did pretty successfully. I'll have to ask the people that I know overseas. But because we're not the best country in the world. We're not the best people in the world. We're not the most entitled. We shouldn't be the most entitled people in the world. Like their cultures everywhere are so beautiful and everyone is so unique. And I try and really learn something from every place I go. But I would say the biggest takeaway or lesson that I've learned from traveling is that not everything is as bad as it seems or could be. So what I mean by that is like in Guyana, like cold showers, no ice, limited resources in the jungle with like insane amounts of bugs and flies that are biting and like just like pretty miserable conditions. Beautiful country. I can't wait to go back now that I've been gone for a while. But like at the time, very hard and lots of poverty. And like you see the way people live, and not just in Guyana, but in a lot of different places. People living simply off the land, living in like shacks, huts, whatever, living a much, much more simple life, which we would define as poverty, extremely poor. Um, and it's like you see the kids running around and they seem pretty happy and they're playing games and people are just kind of happy and you talk to them and they have a lot to like contribute and they seem like their vibe is like pretty rad. And so I was like, huh, well, you take a step back and like life here and we have all these material things and it's like happiness isn't really summed up by material wealth or success or I think we take a lot of those things for granted. Like we can like you can go inside right now, I can turn hot water on like this, hot water comes out as much as I want. We have running clean water, food, I can go to the store, I can buy whatever. Like we have all these things at our fingertips that I think we take for granted a lot. And also like government, things like that. It's not perfect. There's a lot of stuff wrong with our government, as there is in every place, politics, whatever. But I've also spent time in countries where it's like our problems are described as first world problems. Like I'll be saying something to someone I'm really passionate about, and then like I would like kind of catch myself because I'm like, ooh, and they're like, that's cute. That sounds like a first world problem. Like we have like a fucked up, corrupt government. Like we don't have like power. We don't have like the things you are saying don't even make sense to me. So it's like, huh. It's made me be really grateful for where I came from, the opportunities that are so much more easily presented coming from the United States, a first world country. And it's given me a lot of perspective that like material things aren't everything. And like material success isn't everything. Like you can be happy with much less. It's all about just perspective, I guess. And I think the world would be a better place if everyone traveled and everyone got to see those things because when I talk to my less like people I know that have not traveled at all, it's like our perspectives on things are totally different, and there's no way to communicate it. Really, you just have to go and experience it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find that third world countries, the people tend to be a lot happier and they have so much
Yes,
less.
so much less. Those are my favorite countries to go to.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Definitely.
And on the point of you can't really share what it's like to travel and broaden your mind unless you've done it. I find that when you travel, it's always interesting to come back, especially when you travel extensively, to come back and like back into the same environment that you left and nothing's really changed, but you've
Yeah,
expanded immensely.
I actually get, you call it depressed. I actually when I come back, I get the blues for sure. Like I kind of slump, and like it's also hard not to be able to communicate those experiences with someone, especially if you solo travel. I love solo traveling, but then sometimes when I come back, I feel like I'm just babbling. If I have an outlet for it, if like a friend wants to hear me, which they're some of my closest friends are great outlets, and I appreciate them so much. It's sweet when you have a friend that like you can just express all those things to, and they'll hear you and they'll be stoked for you. Um, and then it's also not that sweet when you feel that vibe where it's just like, well, I'm just not gonna talk about that to anyone. It was a good experience I had. It's weird. It's definitely weird to come back after traveling, especially when you're gone for like 6 months or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we could keep talking about this for a while, but I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, we could.
Another time, maybe part two someday.
Yes, sweet. Looking forward to it.
How can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out or see your work? And this will all be linked in the show notes.
Sweet. I'm as a photographer, I'm pretty active on Instagram, so you can reach me on there. Also on my website, there's a contact form, and I'm always looking for fun projects to do and choose to do and people to meet and in any of the places that I go. So yeah, definitely reach out. The Instagram is at Chase Bjornson. And you can find my website on there as well. It's just chasebjornson.world.
Okay. What is your current life motto or mantra?
I'm a big believer in the Ram Dass. Be here now. Just be present. That's all you can do. We don't have anything like what's happened has already happened. The future, there's no point in stressing too much about it because you have no idea what's going to happen. Things could radically change right now, and the future is going to be completely different than whatever you're stressing about. All we have is the present. And so I just try and remind myself periodically throughout the day, like stay present, enjoy this moment, because it's really all we have.
Do you have any practice to keep yourself present besides reminding yourself?
Journaling, and I try and meditate. I was doing yoga really consistently for a while, and I need to get back on that train because I will be honest, I've been way off the train. But when I was actively doing yoga, actively meditating, and actively journaling, that was like peak performance. Whatever was going on in my life, like I was like headspace on point. So I think even if a meditation means like 5 minutes to just sit there and in the morning or whatever, and just give yourself time to just be present in one space and not doing something and just letting your mind chill, whatever that means to you. What the guided meditation I found is really helpful, especially getting into it. Um, but I think you just, even if it's 10 minutes a day, just making that time for yourself, like you said earlier, to like getting out and walking 10 minutes, just giving yourself little micro parts of your day to just focus, just be, it doesn't even have to be by yourself. You can be with a loved one, but like 10 minutes to just focus on you, on your headspace, whether that's meditating, walking, doing yoga, something like that. But I think it's so easy to get caught up in the go and go, like get up and like, all right, I gotta drink my coffee and I gotta get right on. I gotta do all these things until I get home and I'm gonna watch a show. I'm gonna go to bed. It's just like so much go, 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 especially in our society. Whenever I slow down from that, I find it really helps. And I try and remind myself of that every day.
If you could tell everyone in the world one thing and they would take it in, they would internalize it, fully embrace it, what would that be?
You make your own reality, whatever that means to you. Like you create your life. You make your bed that you're gonna sleep in. and you paint the picture of your life. So the only way to make a life that you want to live is to just put your headspace there first and manifest it. But you can do whatever you want in your life. You have to believe in yourself, and you just have to have that thought pattern, like, I'm gonna do this, and take the little steps in that direction, and you'll get there. But you make your own reality.
Thank you so much, Chase, for being here and sharing your story and your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank
And,
you.
and thank you, listeners. Until next time. If you enjoyed this episode or found value in it, I invite you to like, leave a 5-star review, or share with a friend. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Thank you, beautiful human, so much for helping spread the word. Blessings to you. Until next time.